Today's lesson is going to be on the organelles part 2, and we're going to focus on the mitochondria and the chloroplast. The mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell, and it's called the powerhouse of the cell because it's where most of the energy is made. And remember, the energy is going to be in the form of ATP. So the mitochondria is going to make ATP, and the process is, or we could say it's the site of, a process that we're going to learn about in a later chapter called cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, wrong spelling. Cellular respiration is the process in which glucose is turned into or converted into ATP. Now, a couple other things you want to know about the mitochondria. It has a double membrane, and it also has its own DNA. And if you were to draw one, it would look kind of like this. So this would be the outer membrane, and this would be the inner membrane. So we're going to label this one inner membrane, and the inner membrane is where you're going to make your ATP. Okay. The chloroplast is going to be found in plant cells, and it is the site of photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is the process in which CO2 and water is converted into glucose, and then that glucose will head over towards the mitochondria and go through cellular respiration. And it's very similar to the mitochondria because, once again, it has a double membrane, and it has its own DNA. Oh, another thing we want to add up here about mitochondria, the same thing happens in a chloroplast, is it does its own division. So we'll say here that it does its own, like, cell division. So you want to make another one, it can split in half. So down here we'll just say the same thing, does its own cell division. Okay. So if we were to draw one of these, we'll use the green pen for this because these guys are green. This is a circle, and then inside of it, it's going to have these stacks of what really look like poker chips. And these poker chips are called thylakoids. And stacks of thylakoids are called a granum. And so the plural of those would be grana. And this is where you're going to find the pigment chlorophyll, which is used to capture the energy from light. So the only thing that's green inside a plant is the chloroplast, and specifically only these thylakoids. So remember, we have two membranes, membrane 1, and then the thylakoid membranes called here. All right, so we'll just label these here, thylakoids. And this is where the energy of light is captured. Okay? Now, what we also want to list in here to kind of wrap up our study of our cells, what do all cells have in common? Well, first of all cells are going to have a cell membrane. And remember, another name for the cell membrane is the plasma membrane. And its function is to regulate what comes in and out. So just like we had on the earlier podcast. Okay, what we have here again, the next one is going to be DNA. You got to have DNA because in DNA is the info or instructions for making proteins. And you got to have your proteins to regulate all the chemistry that's found within there. Okay? The next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need ribosomes. Because remember, your ribosomes are going to read the mRNA, and they're actually going to make the proteins. Okay, and then the final thing that you're going to find in all cells is going to be a jelly-like substance in which you're going to find just ribosomes, the DNA, and if you have organelles, if you're eukaryotic, floating around. And that's called cytoplasm. And if you want to talk about the liquid of the cytoplasm, because the cytoplasm includes the liquid plus the organelles, the liquid is called cytosol. Okay? Now, also to wrap up, The things that are different between plants and animals, think of plants have three things, animals only have one thing. Okay, plants have a cell wall to protect and support it. Plants have chloroplasts. The chloroplasts are going to be the site of photosynthesis, just like we talked up here above. And the next thing that plants have is a central vacuole. The central vacuole is going to be a storage for water. It's also going to be, when it's full of water, it's going to push up against the cell wall and make the plant stand up nice and tall. And then the last thing is animals have centrioles. Centrioles, if you recall from when we made our models, are circular, or actually they're cylindrical, kind of think of like little barrels, and these are going to be used to make the mitotic spindle during cell division. Alright? Make sure you keep continuing to watch these podcasts and so that you can be ready for any test or quizzes.